The documentary film is based on Ariel Eder's own personal and moving account of his life during the Second World War. The film concentrates on sequences of this very comprehensive, detailed history. Ariel's journey as a small child could not be fully illustrated with personal pictures. Unfortunately, only a few of them were left from happier days. When possible, contemporaneous footage and photographs were used. Selected sequences were partly reconstructed by artificial intelligence. Some facts and figures were added to put Ariel's story into its historical context. Various historians and friends gave us access to unique documents, private collections, special estates, and open archives of renowned museums' important storytelling images. All credits are listed at the end of the movie. This non-commercial private movie was produced by a team of volunteers to give future generations a better understanding of the various aspects of the most tragic event in Jewish history, and especially of the hidden children and all the dangers they were exposed to. Eventually, this famous Citroën Traction Avant will play an essential role in this documentary.
Mama, Papa, why did you leave me behind and alone?
The separation. Will the children ever find their parents again? To save my life, Mom and Dad entrusted me to non-Jewish people. I was left alone. I was one of the Kinder Transport children, leaving Mommy and Daddy behind. I was left alone. To save us, Mom and Dad left us. Now we are alone. Mom sent us off, not to be captured. Now we were alone. We were separated from our parents, and then we were alone. The story says the last time I embraced my mother, and then I was alone. This is the dramatic story of Ariel Eder, a survivor born in 1937. When Ariel was 16, he moved to Israel to study. Later, he married Karin, with whom he founded a family. All of their descendants live in Israel. We are telling the blows of fate that befell this 4.5-year-old child who was suddenly left alone. Ariel's movie is a master case of the stressful moments of hidden children who did not understand what was going on. Too young to ask, they had to accept a strange life, living in a strange environment disconnected from their parents. Sadly enough, Ariel shares his experience with thousands of Jewish children left alone in hiding during World War II. But we are also concerned about these children's parents who escaped and survived the Nazi killing machinery. How did they cope with the separation from the children? How did they cope with their fears about whether they would find their children again and be reunited? The story of Ariel will give us some answers. The long unknown world of the hidden Jewish children. Before we tell Ariel's story, who took hidden Jewish children in? What dangers were they exposed to? The Shoah, the cursed name of Auschwitz and the extermination camps, sowed death by the Third Reich throughout the Jewish communities. In the 40 years after the war, lists of the victims were drawn up. Bringing the disappeared out of anonymity helped to rebuild the survivors' lives, to integrate each personal destiny into a great collective tragedy. However, the story of the victim who had not yet understood that they too had been victims of the Nazis was missing. They were too young to understand their history and to arouse the interests of historians. These are the hidden children, the hidden side of the Shoah. Children's stories are individual. They are all unique. The hidden children spoke out only later when they realized that they were also part of a collective destiny, that of victims who survived the Nazi genocide. Unlike the deported children who perished in the death camps, they were hidden and miraculously saved, separated from their parents in unknown places by families, individuals, and various communities. The fate of the Jewish child in France, Belgium, Holland, and occupied Europe during the war. The circumstances in which he found himself hidden, separated from his parents, and what happened after the war were all different. Hidden but not out of danger. Many dangers lay in wait for these children, even when finally integrated into families, apparently far from risk. Danger, Nazi persecution of Jewish children. As many as 1.5 million Jewish children were murdered or died at the hands of the Nazis or their collaborators. Danger in the hands of dubious smugglers. An imminent danger was being in the hands of dubious smugglers who pretended to take children to non-belligerent countries, but instead handed them over to the Gestapo. Danger, betrayed by informers. Children posing as Christians had to carefully conceal their Jewish identity from inquisitive neighbors, classmates, informers, blackmailers, and the police. Stella Ingrid Goldschlag, a German Jewish woman, collaborated with the Gestapo, exposed and denounced underground Jews. She betrayed or delivered to the Nazis anywhere from 600 to 3,000 people. Danger, converting Jewish children. Many people in religious institutions saved thousands of Jewish children. Children had to learn their new religion's prayers and rituals to hide their Jewish identity. Many were baptized, often without their parents knowing. Danger, being exploited. Foster families, priests, and nuns were mostly caring, but some were also cruel and abusive. After the war, not all of the hidden children were given back their Jewish identity. They often faced great difficulties with the new situation in their families. Danger, being detected due to circumcision. Infant male Jews had to be ritually circumcised. Most Jews continued to practice it during Nazi domination, but had to be extremely careful not to be discovered during sports or in public restrooms. Danger, false documents. The anti-Nazi resistance often helped Jews with forged Aryan papers and baptismal certificates. These legitimate documents could be very risky during close examination by the Germans and the police. How to survive in a foreign environment. Where is my home until mom and dad come back? Foster families put themselves in danger. This couple saved 37 children in a pharmacy in Holland. Convents, churches, Christian organizations, Christian orphanages hid Jewish children and took care of them. Many Catholic priests and religious institutions rescued thousands of Jewish children. Families and orphanages in non-occupied countries fostered kinder transport kids. It was hell in a foreign country, knowing neither the language nor anyone. I was 13 trying to be brave, but I spent most of the day in and out of the toilet so that no one could see me crying. Saving as many children as possible. So among many, 2 Jewish organizations as exceptional examples. The French Osez organization. The children laughed during the day and cried at night. Osez saved 5,000 Jewish children. The Osez organization was the most important institution during World War II to rescue Jewish children in France. It saved around 5,000 children from the gas chambers and evacuated them to Switzerland, Spain, and several hundred to the United States. The Swiss Red Cross ran an Osez home. These youngsters were placed in one of the Osez homes, the Château d'Ille, near Toulouse, and run by the Swiss Red Cross. Lifeline to protect Jewish children. From the beginning of the war, and especially in 1943 and 1944, smuggling, especially to Switzerland, was organized to protect particularly vulnerable children. Other children were placed and hidden in homes run by friendly aid organizations or private individuals between 1939 and 1942 without too many problems. This picture shows an OSE assistant taking children by train to the city of Grenoble from where they were smuggled into Switzerland. After the war, OSE took care of survivors of the concentration camps. Many of them were orphans whose parents had not returned. Finding and rescuing hidden children and returning them to their lost Jewish life. This was the Swiss Rescue Agency for Refugees Abroad, also known as the Sternbuch network. The Swiss Rescue Agency for Refugees Abroad was a Swiss branch of the Vad HaTzalah, the Rescue Committee of the American Union of Orthodox Rabbis, the major Orthodox relief organization which was involved in overseas relief work and financed and rescued many thousands of Jews from Central Europe. Its mission was clear: to give all the rescued Jews back their Jewish identity that they may have lost during the war years. At the head of this Swiss organization were Recha and Yitzchak Sternbuch, who quietly pulled out all the stops to save Jewish lives. They rescued persecuted Jewish leaders, students and their families, whether secular or religious Jews. Recha was exposed to countless dangers. None of this risk frightened her. She put the need of her endangered fellow Jews above her own. The Sternbuch network was so extensive that they even managed to negotiate indirectly through a former president of Switzerland with SS Chief Himmler for the release of Jewish internees in exchange for tractors. They eventually managed to free 1,200 Jewish people from Theresienstadt. There was an option on the table to release many hundreds of thousands of Jews, but the negotiations did not materialize. The Sternbuchs were closely connected to a large number of helpful diplomats. They organized visas for Jews who found a new future in Latin America. They were supported by the Polish embassy, by the ambassador Alexander Lados and his assistant for Jewish affairs, Dr. Julius Kuhl, a religious Jew. They also received support from the papal nuncio, Monsignore Filippo Bernardini. Lados and Nuncio were recognized by Yad Vashem as righteous among the nations. In 1944, when France and Belgium were liberated, the Sternbuch started to plan rescue operations in those two countries. They especially concentrated on finding Jewish children in Gentile homes, monasteries, and other church institutions. It was a key mission for many years to bring these children back to their parents or to their Jewish homes. One member of this extraordinary family was Eli Sternbuch, who will play an important role in finding Ariel Eder. Searching for hidden Jewish children and their missing parents. The International Red Cross set up a message service. Family members were allowed to write up to 25 words on the standard form, but it often took several months for the messages to reach their recipients, if ever. The International Red Cross managed its own tracing service as well as the International Tracing Service of the Allied Forces, and together with Jewish relief organizations, they were involved in the difficult search for children. The children were mostly too young at the time to know their names and ages and were often given new names and dates of birth, which made the search more complicated. The psychologically grueling search. It could take months, perhaps years, for a child to be found by his Jewish parents. For the hidden children, it could have been the realization that they had no surviving family members. When the returning parents came for their child, many foster parents refused to let go as they had looked after the children at great risk. Some biological parents were jealous of the foster parents for being there for their children during their important years, and also the children refused to return to their parents. They did not want to lose a beloved family a second time. On the 14th of February 2006, Yad Vashem posthumously awarded the title of Righteous Among the Nations to the French couple Georgette and Pierre Lefrançois, The award was given in recognition of their having rescued, protected, nourished, cherished, and cared for Ariel Eder tirelessly at the risk of their own lives during the agonizing days of the German occupation during World War II. The ceremony took place at the famous War Memorial in Caen, Normandy, close to where Ariel was hidden from 1942 until early 1945. Looking back on the years when he was hidden away in Normandy, Ariel began his moving speech in deep gratitude for his foster parents with the following heart-rendering words. Try to imagine this small boy happily returning home from a bicycle with a neighbor, eager to tell his parents about the tour he had just made, rushing up the stairs to his apartment and finding himself standing before a locked door. Try to visualize this child, less than 5 years old, knocking on the door with his little fists, crying and begging his parents to let him in. The terrifying silence was the only answer he received. This traumatic event left Ariel with a wound so deep that it has never healed. Mama, Papa, why did you leave me behind and alone? Invasion of Belgium and Antwerp. On May 10, 1940, Nazi Germany invaded Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Belgium. It ended with the surrender of the Belgian army. Germany launched its western offensive with paratroopers invading the Netherlands and continued in Belgium and Luxembourg. Persecution of the Belgian Jews. In October 1940, the German military administration established the anti-Jewish legislation adopted in Germany in 1935. The law forbade Jews to practice certain professions and forced them to register with their local municipality. And this is what the registration looked like. In 1940, the German government began to liquidate Jewish businesses. Antwerp, 1942. The Nazis started to raid Jewish homes and deported the Jews to Mechelen assembly camp and then to Auschwitz. Ariel's earliest childhood. Ariel's mother, Zilli. Ariel's father, Marcus Mordechai. Ariel's story begins in summer of 1942 in Antwerp, Belgium. Life for Jews became daily more threatening. The Nazis were hot on the heels of all of the Jews. The parents decided to flee to Switzerland. Aware of the dangers of this perilous enterprise, they decided to risk the trip without their 4.5-year-old son, without a shadow of doubt, to safeguard his life. Being questioned upon arriving at a Swiss refugee camp, Ariel's father disclosed having received a convocation for his family from the Nazi authorities to present themselves at Mechelen assembly camp, which would have meant certain deportation to Auschwitz. Believing the journey to be too dangerous for a 4-year-old child, this information was established by the well-known Swiss historian Mrs. Ruth Vivas Silbermann, who researched in detail the situation of refugees to Switzerland during the years of the final solution, and gave an in-depth report of the flight of the Eders. About Ariel, she writes, "It is possible, even probable, that they entrusted Ariel to acquaintances, believing the journey to be too dangerous for a 4-year-old child, and they planned to have him brought to France by somebody they trusted. That plan failed." The parents had decided to leave Ariel in the good hands of their neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Mortelmans, and escaped, a move that saved their lives, and ultimately also that of Ariel. The parents escaped to Switzerland. The border was not completely sealed off. Archived documents show that Ariel's parents fled from Antwerp to Lyon, together with his grandmother, and then separated to continue to Switzerland. His father's destination was Zurich, his mother and grandmother's Geneva. Switzerland showed a certain openness. It was not totally closed. It let many endangered people enter while keeping their border officially closed. There was the official policy of dissuading people to enter, but this strategy included a great deal of easing, says historian Ruth Vivas Silbermann. On September 28, 1942, Marcus Eder, Ariel's father, passes illegally through the mountains in the area of Col du Jaune at 2,017 meters altitude on the then Swiss and Italian border. The pass was not too difficult to cross, but the weather conditions were appalling. He had hired the services of smugglers. He went down to a place called St. Maurice and managed to take the train to Zurich. And at the time, fugitives who had not been intercepted at the border were no longer turned back. Ariel's father went to his sister's house in Zurich, only reported to the police the next day. We learned from an archival document that Ariel's mother and grandmother crossed the border illegally on the 5th of October via fields near Moy-sur-Le, close to Geneva. At 1:45 in the morning, they were arrested by security police and sent to a refugee camp. Ariel's life away from his parents. Let's continue with Ariel helpless in front of the locked door. Hearing the neighbor, Mrs. Mortelmans, talking, he goes up to her. She comforted Ariel as best she could, telling him that he could stay with her and that they would surely find a way to his parents. According to Mrs. Mortelmans, a few days after the bicycle ride with her husband, Belgian Nazis collaborators conducted a house-by-house search for the Jews in the street. Mrs. Mortelmans quickly grabbed Ariel and hid him in the loft. These operations started Saturday night, 15th of August 1942. 845 Antwerp Jews were arrested and sent to Mechelen before being deported to Auschwitz. These raids must certainly have frightened the Mortelmans. The immediate reaction of the Mortelmans was to hide Ariel's Jewishness and to give him a less Jewish-sounding name. From Ariel Eder, he became Henri Redder. This is the original note with his protected name written by Mr. Mortelmans that from now on he had to carry in his trousers pocket. His parents' original plan. Under his new name, Henri was to pass his way to the Belgian-French border to be smuggled into France by a passeur or a smuggler. The idea was to take him to Marseille, to an Ossé home, and from there to organize his journey to his parents in Switzerland. From a letter we found in the Swiss archive, we learned that Henri had been taken to someone who knew a passeur who would eventually take him to Marseille. However, the intended passeur had been arrested, so the immediate family took Henri to Paris to a certain Lucien Sigust, the owner of a bar-restaurant called Le Rancho at 58 Avenue de Wagram, and asked him to look after the child. This picture shows the place where the bar was located. At the time, Paris was occupied by the Nazis, and the right opposite Le Rancho was the German cinema. Apparently, there were also Nazi officers on the upper floors. It may be that Lucien's proximity to the Nazis put him in an unwanted danger because he was harboring a Jewish child. Lucien Sigus, not knowing what to do with the young boy, took him to a friend, Emilien Lefrançois. This was Henri's first acquaintance with his new French family. Ariel Henri's new home and life as a hidden child. After a few days with no sign from the passeur, Emilienne suggested to Lucien that the child shouldn't stay in Paris. She proposed to send him to her brother René, who lived in the tiny village of Saint-Martin-de-Bienfaite, also called Bienfaite, in the Calvados region of Normandy. She reasoned that in wartime, life in the countryside was to some extent easier than in town. Since Henri's presence in France was illegal, he was not registered and therefore not entitled to food or clothing vouchers. A few days after the arrival in Bienfaite, René's brother Pierre appeared. Sitting on a horse-drawn cart, Ariel remembers the horse was called Bichette. Pierre and his family were moving into the house next door to René. Henri fell in love with Pierre's smile, his warmth, and the way he spoke to him. Although he did not yet understand a word of French, as a result, within a few days he started calling him Papa. Pierre was the hero. Georgette, the foster mother, was the good fairy. From his first day with them in autumn of 1942 until he departed from Bienfaite in February 1945, they showered Henri with love and warmth. For him, it was as if he had found his parents again, and, as a bonus, with a sister. The family life of the foster parents Lefrançois, their help and dangers. There is one open important question. Did Henri's foster mother know what was going on in France during those dark days? Or was she perhaps merely guided by common sense? Was she aware of the discriminatory edicts against Jews or the raids against Jewish children? Was she aware that members of the Nazi or collaborator guards were standing near schools on the lookout for children wearing a yellow star and caught them? Where would Ariel have been led away to if she and her husband had not sheltered him? Georgette and Pierre loved Henri like they loved their own child. They spoiled and cared for him no different from their daughter Pierrette, which certainly wasn't easy for her. It is not easy to change from being an only child and being obligated to share your parents with an unexpected older brother. Later, Ariel became increasingly aware of the tremendous risks that they had taken upon themselves and the predicaments they had to cope with. Among other difficulties, when the child arrived at Bienfaite, he did not speak or understand French. He had no identification papers and therefore no legal status in France. To overcome the situation, they reasoned that his Jewishness had to be hidden at all costs. But how do you do this? One of Henri's foster father's brother, the Abbé, Paul Lefrançois, contributed by finding a temporary solution to the problem of Henri's legal status. He was active in the resistance, always prepared to defend a just cause, sharp-minded, and always ready with an answer. He prepared a false certificate according to which Pierre Lefrançois, when marrying Georgette Suzanne, agreed to adopt her illegitimate son Henri, who was born before her marriage. This document legitimized a bastard. The foster parents also decided to teach Henri some prayers and basic religious practices so he would not stand out from the other children of his age. Georgette and Pierre were fully aware that should there be even the slightest threat of having to authenticate the certificate, the entire family would have to move and go underground. For Ariel, the Lefrançois family will always remain his family. Today, Ariel keeps on saying, "I had two mothers." In later days, when Ariel was rescued and visited his foster mother Georgette, she wanted to let him in on the secret. "I want you to know that if I taught you prayers and some basic Catholic practices, it was only to save your life and avoid attracting the attention of the other inhabitants of the villages, to keep up appearances with some of the neighbors. All of the time I kept wondering how I would dare look your parents in the eyes at the end of the war if I had inadvertently caused you to embrace the Catholic faith." Desperately seeking Ariel. The father's poem for his missing son. The harrowing song of Ariel's father in deepest sorrow searching for his only son. Between the end of 1942 and the beginning of 1944, there is still no sign of life from Ariel. In this deep concern for the fate of his son, the father writes this heartbreaking poem. "Silently I weep all night, and in the daytime my soul howls bitterly for my son Ariel. To you, God, I shall pray. If sometimes I go out for a breath of fresh air, even then I shall walk with my head bowed, my heart oppressed and my soul downcast. All day long I shall tire my mind, and at night I shall find no rest. A voice wails in my heart of hearts, where is my main strength?" Is he still in Marseille, in the hands of some Gentile? How will I compensate him when God is not beside me? Please, God, give me the strength. Please release my shackles. Show me my tender child. This is my plea. 1942. While in Switzerland, the parents set about looking for their son. He was not in Marseille, Spain, or Portugal. Extensive correspondence with many organizations led to success in the autumn of 1943. Ariel has been found in Saint Martin de Bienfaite in Normandy. He lives with the Lefrançois family. He is doing well. He goes to school and is making progress. This information was passed on by Mr. Lefrançois to the Red Cross in Paris. The foster parents wanted a search to be carried out to find Ariel's parents, but they asked that no inquiries be made in the Calvados region so as not to reveal that Ariel was not their biological child. They wished to be satisfied with this news for the time being. November 30th, 1943. Letter by a friend of Ariel's mother to the Association of Swiss Jewish Refugee Aid. Summary. Ariel's mother, who was already in poor health, collapsed on receiving the good news and now lies in bed. From July 1944 to February 1945, at which time there were no longer any battles in Normandy, Georgette Lefrançois had been literally bombarded with posts from the Eder family, sent from messenger service of the International Red Cross, postcards, telegrams, and letters from all kinds of institutions and organizations, asking to deliver Ariel as soon as possible to his sick mother in Switzerland, bringing Ariel back to his parents. According to the doctors who treated Ariel's mother, the return of her lost son was the only remedy that might help her. She was hospitalized in Geneva. Mr. Eli Sternbuch from Switzerland. Who was Eli Sternbuch? At the beginning of this film, we talked about the Sternbuch network, which among others searched for hidden children. Eli's wife Gutta wrote in her book, Eli worked on behalf of the Red Cross, trying to reunite children with their parents. He traveled all over France looking for children who had been taken from their parents and given to the French Gentile families. Eli Sternbuch was in contact with Ariel's parents and promised the seriously ill mother that he would look for her child and bring him back to her. The Mishnah in Masechet Sanhedrin tells us, "He who contributes to the saving of one human being has as much merit as if he saved the entire world." Committed to saving Jewish lives, Mr. Sternbuch engaged in the project to bring Ariel back to his parents. The day of reunification, the R Day, was close. On the day of reunification, the R Day, on 20th of January 1945, before the end of the Second World War, the Lefrançois in Bienfaite received this telegram with the following content. Please prepare the child Eder Ariel for departure tomorrow, 20th January. We are coming by car with a letter from his mother, signed for the committee with best regards, Label. Mr. Label, who was the head of the Jewish Children's Home, the later yeshiva in Aix-les-Bains, France, wrote in the name of the Sternbuch Network, the Swiss Rescue Agency for Refugees Abroad. Eli Sternbuch and his chauffeur, probably Dr. Kuhl, assistant for Jewish affairs at the Polish embassy, are on their way and arrive in Bienfaite, in the famous Citroën Traction Avant that Ariel still remembers so well. Eli Sternbuch and his driver stop and ask a young lady for a family Lefrançois with a 7-8-year-old boy. She is apparently from the family and proposes to get into the car and says,
"I'll show you the way. But look who's coming towards us. Henri, where are you going?"
I'm going to the celebration.
"Why? You have visitors. Come back with us."
Mummy didn't tell me about visitors.
This is Henri, Georgette's boy.
Hi, Andre. She's right. We're on the way to visit your mom. Jump into the car and we'll all go together.
I wanted to go to the celebration. Mum and Pierrette are also on their way.
And maybe she expected us yesterday. Come with us now, and your mom will tell you what to do.
No, I'm not allowed to enter strange cars.
I understand, but Mademoiselle G, here in the car, is not a stranger, is she? Jump in next to her in the back seat.
It's okay, Henri. Get in here next to me.
They have reached Henri's home. Georgette and Pierrette have not left yet. Mr. Sternbuch and Mrs. Lefrançois introduce themselves to one another. Mr. Sternbuch tells her that they picked up Henri on the way and explains he came to bring him back to his parents, as he told in his telegram.
This is very difficult for me. But tell me, how do I know that Henri's parents sent you?
I have a letter from his mother. You recognize her handwriting, don't you? And this is a certificate that I represent an organization whose aim is to find children all over France and other countries who are hidden by wonderful people like you to protect them. Does Henri know that he is leaving you?
Of course not. We had to hide his real identity even from himself. Paul, my brother-in-law, who is a priest, issued a certificate that Henri is my illegitimate son, born before I met my late husband Pierre. I know that he must go back to his parents, but this is too sudden for me. Give me some time. Maybe you will come back next week?
I am afraid that is not possible. You must understand that his mother is very ill, and according to her doctor, only the immediate return of her son will bring about her recovery. We must take him with us to Paris today, and from there we will bring him to Switzerland, where his parents are expecting him.
Mr. Sternbuch, I want to tell you something. My husband Pierre and I took this child into our home and heart. We raised him and loved him as our own son. He became like a big brother to Pierrette. For 2.5 years, we risked our and our family's lives if Henri's real identity would be disclosed. During the last year, I lost first a newborn baby, and then my husband, who was killed while taking part in an underground activity.
Listen, Madame Lefrancois, I have an idea. Why don't you and Pierrette accompany us to Paris? Stay with us tonight. You will have the opportunity to prepare him for the separation. We will get to know each other a little better, and you will hopefully be convinced that Henri is in good hands. I am sure that you will soon have many opportunities to meet again. And after all, Bienfaite and Antwerp are not very far away from each other.
This is the picture of the original card Mr. Sternbuch gave Georgette. A sad journey to Paris. They drove to Paris. Ariel cried. He did not want to leave his mother and his sister Pierrette. In Paris, they went to a photographer. Beautiful but not happy-looking pictures. Ariel's day gets closer. There was another 2 stops before getting to Geneva. Several weeks in Lyon with Mr. Sternbuch's acquaintances in the Jewish home in the Aix-les-Bains, headed by Mr. Label, who sent the telegram. According to her in-depth research of over 20 years, historian Ruth Fivaz Silberman published the following number. Between 1939 and 1945, 15,519 Jewish people tried to cross the border in the French part of Switzerland. 12,675 were allowed to enter, but 2,844 were turned away. March 8, 1945, Ariel's Day after nearly 3 years. How and where did the 8-year-old boy cross the Swiss border? Officially arrested, but Ariel was arrested because he entered Switzerland illegally. This is the official form of arrest by the Swiss Army Border Police. And they let him through. We found the answer in documents that were given by an archive. In the secret file 10093, we read the minutes taken in the presence of his mother. My biological parents took steps at the immigration police. I was taken to the Swiss border by Mr. Sternbuch, whom my parents had known for a long time. Although the passage was illegal, they let him through. And from that moment, Henri Eder became Ariel Eder again, finally reunited in the Geneva police station.
Mrs. Eder, I've kept my promise. Ariel is here.
Ariel, mein Kind, mein Schatz. Do you know who I am? Do you recognize me?
Your hair. It looks different.
Yes, you're right. Last time I had dark hair. Remember? Now it's white. Do you like it this way, Ariel?
I don't know.
But you too look different. Back then you were this small. Now you've grown into a tall, handsome boy. Papa Mordechai will be so happy to see his big boy. Ariel, my darling, can I have a hug?
I want to go home.
Of course. Soon we'll go home together. Papa, Mama, and you.
I want to go home to my mummy in Bienfaite.
We'll go to our home in Antwerp. You'll return to your beautiful room, your games and your books.
You left me behind. Now I have another home.
We'll talk about it tomorrow when Papa is here. It's getting late and we're very tired. Let's go to bed now. Papa will come and he has a wonderful surprise for you. Say goodbye and thank you to Mr. Sternbuch. He brought you all the way from Bienfaite.
Ariel reunited with his father. Ariel's feeling until today: I had two mothers. Was I glad to return to my biological parents? It took me some time to readapt to the parents who had left me behind without any attempt to explain the need for the separation in the summer of 1942. There were many times when my biological mother would scold or reprimand me for my bad behavior, and I would say to her, my French mother would never have acted like this in those circumstances. Yes, children can sometimes be very cruel, even with wonderful parents. In June 1945, the family was relocated to Antwerp. At the age of 16, Ariel made Aliyah. He studied at Bar Ilan University, where he met his future wife Karin, who had lived in Denmark during World War II. Ariel Eder's conclusion: is it pure coincidence that I spent 2.5 years of my childhood in Bienfaite, which means good deed in French? A quotation says, good deeds are rewarded. And that is the most wonderful reward of Ariel's moving early childhood. All of this was made possible thanks to the courage, altruism, and the strong sense of humanitarian values that prevailed even during the most dramatic situations. We should, of course, not forget the tool that brought Ariel to freedom.